Hello and welcome to the Savage Movie Night podcast. I'm your Cincinnati-based media conglomerate, soon to be torn apart by corporate raiders host Adam. Joining me as always is our aspiring singer, actress, regretting agreeing to appear in a box office bomb starring Bob Dylan, co-host Kristen. How are you, Kristen?
Hey Adam, I'm doing good. How about you?
Awesome. What TV shows are you watching right now?
I'm in a rewatch era right now. I've been rewatching my favorite anime Haikyuu by myself, and I'm also showing my husband The Good Place. And we actually are watching Black Mirror for the first time ever. We just started that the other
Oh,
day.
well, I'm not familiar with the anime. I'll have to check that out. But The Good Place is so fun. It is like a warm hug. I need to rewatch that. And Black Mirror is just awesome. So glad you get a chance to rewatch that. Uh, had you seen the most recent season then? Uh,
No, this is our first time seeing Black Mirror ever.
okay.
We
So
rewatched the other two, but Black Mirror is the new thing for us. So we never got around to watching it. So this is brand new for us.
Okay, I thought you said that was another one you had seen, but your husband hadn't. So, well,
Mm.
that's exciting. I really enjoy it. But I was also a big fan of like the Twilight Zone and Outer Limits back in the day. So, awesome. Well, look forward to hearing, what Greg's thoughts on The Good Place are and hearing what you both think of Black Mirror. So. All right. And rounding out our regular trio is our young, struggling musician taking a bit part in a film and realizing he would rather have 9-inch nails driven into him. Co-host Rob. Rob, how are you?
Hey Adam, how you doing today?
Good. Now, to bring your mood down a bit, just how disappointing has the Cubs offseason been for you?
Please, not at all. Most of my life we were the lovable losers, and something happened a few years back. We somehow won, and that's changed everything. So this is the best time of the year right now.
Yeah.
I'm stoked.
Well, you know, the Ricketts decided, we give the city one. And we're good for another 100 years. We don't have to spend any money on the team, and we can just rake in as much money as we want. Uh,
It's a racket, we know it, but still love it.
yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Well, on today's episode, we are going to learn why this film wishes it had been born in the USA, possible effects of not being allowed to see any movies until you're 17, and most importantly, wait, Joan Jett seriously starred in a movie? We've never heard of it before? Are we sure this is right? It is, because today we are talking about Paul Schrader's 1987 film, Light of Day. But first, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Jazzology with Willard Jenkins. Jazzology is a fun and challenging jazz trivia show where two contestants go head to head for the chance to win $100 and prove their jazz knowledge. Watch along and see if you know the answers. Want to prove you are a true jazzologist by appearing as a contestant on the show? Use the link in the description of any episode to sign up. New episodes air every other Friday on Savage Content YouTube channel, youtube.com/Savage Content. And all past episodes are available under the Live tab. Thanks to Jazzology for sponsoring today's episode. And now, back to the show. Before we get our tickets and talk about the movie, we need to figure out how the film came about. To some people listening, Paul Schrader is an instantly recognizable name, but for everyone else, and as a refresher, let's give a quick recap. Schrader broke into screenwriting with the script for a film called The Yakuza in 1974. A few years later, he wrote one of his most famous scripts, Taxi Driver, in 1976. Based on that success, he would start directing as well, writing and directing Blue Collar in 1978. He followed it up by writing and directing Hardcore in 1979 and American Gigolo in 1980, and writing Raging Bull in 1981. In 1981 as well, Schrader's mother had recently passed away, and he started working on a script using the project to process and channel his grief and emotions. The script would be about two brothers playing together in a bar band. Paul talked to people in the music industry, including Bruce Springsteen, about which city was the best rock and roll city, and Springsteen and others named Cleveland. Schrader spent time in Cleveland overseeing the bar rock scene. He said he basically acted as a roadie for 2 weeks for a popular local band, the Generators. While gathering material, one of the songs they would perform had the line, "I can't help it. I was born in the USA." The phrase "born in the USA" struck with him and became the title of the script. So, what do you guys know about Paul Schrader before this?
Nothing. I know nothing. I have heard of the movie Taxi Driver, but I have not seen it, and I really am not familiar with much of his other work. So this was my first introduction to the man.
Well,
interesting one.
I think we talked about originally before I could find some production information. The script for this was more just like a deep dive into Paul Schrader's background, which is very fascinating. That he grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, in a strict Calvinist household. And Calvinist is like this predeterminist, very somber religion. Branch of Christianity, and so you can see that reflected, in his movies, especially like Hardcore, and then you can see, how some of that gets channeled later into Light of Day. But one of the other interesting things about his upbringing is he didn't see a movie until he was 17 years old, because they were forbidden. And he actually, even at that age, he had to sneak out to go see them. And so he's even acknowledged that he has a very technical, like mechanical way of approaching screenwriting. And he attributes this because he doesn't have the nostalgia for seeing movies when he was young. And that's always been, like one of the criticisms of his films, especially the ones he directs, but even like Taxi Driver, to an extent, and Bring Out the Dead, that there's this kind of detachment, this cold, clinical, even somewhat Calvinistic approach to the story. That can be somewhat alienating to audiences. And so knowing that, learning that about Schrader for me was very interesting, because it puts some of his work into perspective. But, it's also interesting as we talk more about the film, about Light of Day, because, knowing that kind of approach, that was more what I was expecting going into the movie. Like I was, more familiar with like Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, Hardcore, stuff like that. And so, there is definitely a bit of a contrast to what we actually see in the film. Rob, what are your thoughts?
Not much, unfortunately. No, I don't know too much about him. Learning right now.
Yeah. No worries. Well, that's where I kind of wanted to, I put the break there, so I could just kind of dump some of the stuff that we cut from the script, but I also, we'll get into why the script didn't end up being called Born in the USA in the next section. But, so far, I found, all that interesting about, how he, spent the time in Cleveland and, kept hearing that phrase. So that's a little background on Paul Schrader. Bruce Springsteen, who had been talking to Schrader about the project, was also considering entering the acting realm at this time. Paul decided he wanted Springsteen to play one of the leads. Reports differ on which of the final roles was originally meant for him, so it's kind of hard to say. But he sent Springsteen the script. Bruce was interested, but unsure if he even wanted to enter acting at all. In that time, the script set on his coffee table, the title visible whenever he passed by. Ultimately, Springsteen decided he didn't want to get into acting, and the deal for the movie that had been set up at Paramount fell apart. In 1984, with the movie no longer going anywhere, Schrader headed to Japan to begin working on Mishima, A Life in Four Parts, released in 1985. While there, he was browsing a record store and came across an album called Born in the USA. Looking closer, he saw the artist was Bruce Springsteen, and checking the liner notes, he saw himself credited. Paul talked with Bruce. Bruce apologized and said that while he never read the script, he kept seeing the title as the script sat there, and it stuck in his head, leading to the song. As a favor to Schrader, Springsteen wrote a new song just for the film, Light of Day, which became the new title of the project. Restarting the project, Schrader had to find a new studio for the film, which resulted in Light of Day at Taft Barish Productions, which had a brand new distribution deal with TriStar Pictures. Taft Barish Productions was a joint venture between Taft Entertainment Company, a subsidiary of the now defunct Taft Broadcasting based in Cincinnati, Ohio, and producer and businessman Keith Barish's Barish Productions. Paul also began reworking the script, with the leads at some point shifting from two brothers to a brother and a sister. So, what do you guys think about, the origins of not only the script, but, also a classic Bruce Springsteen album?
Yeah, I was curious about why he decided to ultimately keep the Born in the USA thing. So it's interesting that just seeing the title must have sparked inspiration for Bruce Springsteen to write the song. That yeah, I mean, anytime you say it, it just plays in my head. It's it's a good song. It's iconic. So that's I always love learning background like that about different songs and how they came to be. So that's cool, even though it's a bummer that ultimately his connection to the film didn't really go anywhere, but at least started something.
Yeah, well, and it was interesting that, like when I was first reading, like, oh, it was originally going to be called Born in the USA. I'm like, well, you can't do that. There's a Springsteen album called that. Like that's not going to work. And then you realize like it was going to be called that. Then you learn the full history that not only was it going to be called that before the Springsteen album came out, but it was that being called that led to the Springsteen album, which led to the changing. And then, and that's gets into the, even more the mystery about how this film is somewhat obscure today, because Bruce Springsteen wrote a whole original song for this, and there's so much trivia around it. And so, that it kind of disappeared off the pop culture landscape is so weird, uh, so, Rob, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think it sounds like, kind of typical. We just, in hindsight now, it has a different meaning, but it feels like a typical kind of story of how things develop in Hollywood and how different projects go in different directions. It's just, I think it's just obviously more interesting now that it has, the whole story behind it now. It's a different view.
Yeah. Now, I'm also including a little bit more about like the production company behind it, in part because Taft Broadcasting, and its subsidiary Taft Entertainment were huge in Cincinnati growing up. That Kristen, they used to own Channel 12, WKRC here in Cincinnati. They also used to own Kings Island. At this point in time, they also owned the animation companies Ruby Spears and Hanna-Barbera. So at the time, that also explains why Kings Island was themed along, with Hanna-Barbera characters. Okay, we're parking in Fred Flintstone F or whatever. So a big part of personal connection there, and also there's a bit more even as we get to the aftermath of what happens after the movie. There's even a bit more of a personal connection that I'll kind of share with you guys a little off mic as we go from there. The project is rolling along, and Schrader has kind of restarted his interest in it. He's a little, uh, you know, going through the motions, seeing where this will go. So he's got, the script has been reworked a bit. It's got it set up at a new production company. But part of getting that project restarted involved casting Michael J. Fox as one of the leads. Fox was one of the biggest stars in Hollywood at the time. He was starring on the hit NBC sitcom Family Ties, playing the oldest child of two ex-hippies who rebels by becoming a Reaganite yuppie. He'd made the big jump to film while still staying on the show in 1985, starring in the hit films Back to the Future and Teen Wolf, both released that summer within months of each other. Schrader was unsure about casting Fox, because Paul didn't think Michael could properly portray a tough blue-collar character with so much of his image wrapped up in being the opposite. Fox, for his part, was eager to take the role as a way to branch out into dramatic characters and for the chance to work with Schrader. Michael worked to raise his musical skills for several months before shooting began. He rented studio space and began playing consistently with a Hollywood band called Coyotes in a Graveyard. One bit of concern for Fox outside of the music was the role would require smoking on screen. While he was a heavy smoker off screen at the time, this would be the first time he would smoke on screen, and he worried it might encourage smoking with his younger audience. This is a casting choice that the production company is forcing on Schrader. Clearly, they see Fox as making the film more bankable, more palatable to the general audience. And I understand, both points of view. I understand why the studio would want Fox in there, and I also understand Schrader's reluctance, because that again was one of the things that attracted me to wanting to watch this movie. Was like, you read the description and you see Michael J. Fox is in there, and you're like, this doesn't fit. Like, how is this gonna work?
But also having that big name in there does help, because like you said, you saw Michael J. Fox and you're like, oh my gosh, what? How have I not seen this movie of his? And I think that, like, even though he was hesitant, like, it at least helped people like us decide to just watch it years after it came out, just because of name recognition alone. Of course, there's another person that is a big person in this film that also got our interest, but we'll talk about her later.
If they were able to somehow morph Teen Wolf into this at the same time, that would work better.
Yeah, no, I think most, given slight spoilers, but I think a lot of Michael J. Fox's other characters might have worked better in this movie than his character in the film actually did. But that's the other thing, like, that can be somewhat hard to wrap our heads around, because at the time, there was a big delineation between being a TV actor and a film actor. And it was rare enough to break out of being a TV actor and become a film actor. But it was almost unheard of to be doing both at the same time, to be on one of the most popular shows and to have one of the biggest movies at the box office at the same time in the 1980s was almost unheard of, especially because they're filming like 22, 26 episodes a year. So they have almost no time off. So like for Back to the Future, especially because like he was brought in last minute because Eric Stoltz didn't work out, that he's filming Family Ties during the day and Back to the Future at night, the work ethic and schedule that Michael, like when you look at his filmography throughout this period that Michael J. Fox kept up, is also just insane. So
clearly that was the right time to stretch his range to this role.
Yeah. Well, and we'll talk about, how he was later on if he was able to do any other dramatic roles. But yeah, no, it was the right time, that he was trying to make sure he didn't get typecast, as because Marty McFly, even the guy in Teen Wolf, is a little similar to Alex P. Keaton, the character he played on Family Ties. And so, he's doing everything he can to make sure he doesn't get typecast as just the Alex P. Keaton type role. And that is a danger. I know I grew up watching Family Ties, and at least as a kid for a long time, I just kind of, even though I knew he was an actor, I just kind of put him in that type of role all the time. And I was like, I don't actually like him. I don't like his work. And then you start seeing more and more of his stuff, and it's like, oh, I really enjoy him as a performer. So for the other lead, that isn't Michael J. Fox, Schrader wanted an actual singer, feeling that audiences have a tendency to reject non-singers in lead roles of movies that focus on music. His first choice was Fiona Flanagan, who used the mononym Fiona professionally. Fiona's 1985 song Talk to Me had done well, reaching 64 on the Hot 100, and she had kick-started her acting career in the beginning of 1986 with an appearance on Miami Vice. However, she ultimately didn't work out for Light of Day, but she did go on to star in a music-based movie that also released in 1987, The Maligned Hearts of Fire, starring Bob Dylan. With Fiona out, Schrader turned to Joan Jett. Jett first entered the music world with the all-girl teen rock group The Runaways. They had 2 top 10 hits on the Hot 100 before Jett left the group to pursue a solo career. She formed Joan Jett and the Blackhearts and reached #1 on the Hot 100 with the single I Love Rock and Roll, a cover of a 1975 song by British rock group Arrow. Like Springsteen had been earlier, Jett was interested in trying acting, but she was hesitant about the project, as she didn't just want to play a rock star. However, once she read the script and saw the music was more of a complement to the family drama, she signed on. So, what do you guys think of Joan Jett and Schrader's thoughts on needing an actual musician in that spot?
I gotta respect the choice, honestly. Like I definitely think it feels more authentic if it's a person who has the experience and actually has the talent where they don't have to do some other pre-recording craziness or whatever. Um, but also like I don't know, Joan Jett is just so cool. But like I'm a pretty big fan of her, and like my mom has always loved Joan Jett, so that was like a part that I was looking forward to with this movie. But it's interesting to me that she read this script and was like, yeah, this is gonna be great. Like I don't know. That I'm jumping ahead a little bit too, but there are definitely parts of the script where I'm like, really? You were like, yeah, this sounds like a great movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
I definitely understand the mentality of it. I just think that at the time and even now, I still think that it was too small of a like her appeal was too small of an audience. But then again, I'm probably not qualified to even really talk about this. Like I don't really know her world that much.
Yeah. Well, and like she had gotten to be a fairly big name. She was had outside of just I Love Rock and Roll, and the songs with the Runaway. She had a number of other hit songs, so she was a fairly successful musician and would continue to be a successful musician after the film came out.
I don't
We'll
know. I
talk.
I I, I felt like there was a little bit of a like this whole move like everything was a bit outdated. Like it was 5 years late.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and I mean that's something we'll talk about. We'll get into everything that is because spoilers. Like this movie there's just stuff that's off and weird choices. Like and that like so we'll talk about it more. But um You
Do you have
know,
any idea who else was up for the lead? Like, did they
those were the only names I saw was Fiona, who'd been uh, uh, who'd had that minor hit, and then Joan Jett. Um, and I also don't know how the script changed after Bruce's involvement, because one of the things Schrader, I don't remember if he actually said exactly, but it kind of indicated that when he resumed the project, his full passion wasn't in it the same way it had been previously. And so he was almost going through the project on autopilot. And so,
wow.
you question how that affected things as well. Um, that because it started off as something deeply personal, and then he just kind of lost interest in it and only picked it back up because interest kind of resumed in it, you know. But the interest was all outside interest, and so he's just then kind of going along with it. And I think in some ways that kind of comes through, in the rest of the project as well. Uh, but let's get through this last little bit, and then we'll get on to actually talking about the movie. So, uh, principal photography began on March 26, 1986, with 10 weeks of filming in and around the Chicago area, before moving to Cleveland for 2 weeks of additional exterior filming. One unusual production note is that normally music performances in films are filmed the same way they do music videos. There's a track recorded in a studio. For a music video, this is the song on the album. For a movie, it's something that's usually recorded specifically for the film. And then the track is played during the filming and the performers play along. Their playing and singing on that day isn't captured except visually, so any mistakes are hidden by the studio perfect track. For this film, they instead had the actors and musicians perform for real on the set, and the performance is used in the final, mistakes and all. That this is done to give a more authentic bar band feel. And again, this also gets back into part of why he wanted a actual musician in the Joan Jett role, and why Michael J. Fox had to do months and months, what seemed like out of his own pocket, of renting the studio and practicing with a band to prep for the part. So he felt like he could competently hang in these areas. But did all that effort, uh, did all that authentic feel lead to a better movie? To learn if it did, let's now journey to opening night, February 6th, 1987, and buy a ticket. It's time to talk about the film itself. Kristen, take us through the plot.
All right, so opening up the film, we've got the title song, Light of Day, playing that we mentioned briefly, written by Bruce Springsteen. We see clips of the city of Cleveland, Ohio. We're setting the scene here. Siblings Patty and Joe Rasnick, they're performing a song with their band, the Barbusters. And then we kind of learn a little bit about their background. Patty's a single mother to her son Benji. Joe works at a manufacturing plant, and he is like trying to help support his sister and nephew. And then Patty is estranged from their religious parents. Tensions are high. At one point, they go to visit, and then you have this moment where the mother is asking God to forgive the sins of Patty's youth, which kind of peeves Patty off, and she storms out of the house. So kind of right away, you're seeing what the dynamic is between this family. But what are some of the first impressions that you guys had about the band's introduction, the character's introduction? Like as an audience member, how did you feel about the music?
I thought the music was good. I thought it was a nice little introduction. At this point, we're early enough in the film that, I'm not really jumping to conclusions on what it's going to be one way or the other.
Mm.
I think one of the things I noticed early on, but especially more as the film went on, was just the cinematography. And maybe some of this was in my head because I know Schrader mentioned he felt like he had learned a lot more mature and sophisticated cinematic language and that he regressed in this film. And I thought he was just talking about like camera movement and stuff. And that's more what the quotes seem to indicate. But even just like the lighting and stuff of this film is very flat, very much in more the TV style, where everything's fairly evenly lit, so you can do these quick setups that you don't have to spend as much time because you don't have as much time and budget as you do for a film to mess with lighting. And so, uh, um, it leads to a more bland, uh, uh, visual palette. But so that was my first kind of thoughts. I don't know about you guys.
No, I'm glad that you mentioned that because I think it's those peripherals that I picked up on told me not to really judge the music that much in this beginning part because that too was bland. So I thought, okay, well, this is not the time for unveiling the great music that's going to be unveiled in this movie. As far as like the parents are concerned, and those two characters, first thing I thought of when I saw, of course, the father was the power of Christ compels thee, because he is the father is the priest character. You've seen him in the most, probably the most known role that he's played was the priest in The Exorcist, right? The 1973 classic, and also in The Exorcist 3. He's actually a very legit actor, went on to winning a Pulitzer and Tony for that champion season in 1973. He's a very legit actor.
Yeah.
And then her mom, I'm a big fan just because of her name's Gina Rowlands. She was the lead actress in Gloria, the original movie Gloria from 1980, which is a kind of another gem that's really a lot of people haven't seen, but if you have, it's an amazing film. Love that character. So I mean, right away, I felt an affiliation to both characters. I thought they kind of played the Midwest, mom and pa, I think they kind of nailed their parts well.
Yeah, no, they did a great job, and one of the things I learned about Jason Miller, watching this is, his son is also an actor who I know, Jason Patrick. He was in like Rush, which was a undercover cop movie in the early 90s, but he also like took over the Keanu Reeves role in Speed 2, Cruise Control, amongst many, many, many other things. But also, like apparently Miller, especially because of that play you mentioned, which he wrote and starred in and stuff, was like a hero in Scranton, where he'd been born and raised, to the point where after he died, they commissioned a bronze statue of him to be erected. But it's not just that they commissioned a statue, it's who they had do the statue that I found really fascinating. It was Paul Sorvino, the actor from like Goodfellas, and also father of Mia Sorvino.
He creates statues?
Yes, he does that too. That was my reaction. He had been very close friends, and also apparently one of his other skills, businesses, hobbies, however you want to call it, is a very accomplished bronze artist. And so they unveiled the statue in 2008, but I was like, wait, are we talking about the same Paul Sorvino? Like, is he qualified to make a bronze statue?
I don't know.
So,
another thing that I thought was interesting when I learned about who plays Patty and Joe's mom was like, looking through her IMDb, for anyone who's like in their 20s will probably recognize the elderly version of her, because she played the main character Allie from The Notebook. And that was one that I was like, oh, okay, because like sometimes you think you don't know an actor or an actress, and then you look up their IMDb and it's just because people grow and change over time. So I did know her, so that was a cool thing. How did you guys end up watching this movie? Did you guys both rent on Amazon, or how did you watch?
Well, I actually purchased on Amazon because
On Amazon.
Yeah.
I saw it on YouTube.
On
Yeah.
YouTube, okay. I was asking because like on Amazon, the quality was like not great. I'm sure it wasn't great on YouTube either, but like that
Yeah,
was
yeah.
one of the that
It
was
was
my first
SD.
impression.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it was SD because, you know, a good quality transfer, you have to go back to the original print. And so if they're just pulling, like, I don't know, I hadn't seen that it ever had an official DVD release. So
Yeah.
you probably didn't even get upscaled enough for DVD at any point, or even if it did, it was a cheap transfer at the time, and so you're most likely going off the original, uh, uh, you know, VHS transfer that, it's, it looks aged, which,
Yeah, you
you
can tell.
know, yeah, well, back in the day, like you could tell how old a movie was by the quality of the film stock and how it had degraded over time. So just looking at the age of the film. So like like if you put on, like in the early 2000s, if you put on a movie from the mid 80s, just by looking at the quality of the film stock, you could tell it was from the mid 80s. If you put on something from the 70s, by the quality of film stock, you could tell. Um, and that kind of has gone away now for the most part with how, with cleanups for, like 4K HD transfers and stuff. Like I'll watch a movie from the 70s or, even the 80s and or 90s and just be like, my God, this looks more gorgeous than I could ever have remembered. Like I wonder if it even looked this gorgeous when it was actually in theaters, or if, we're now, passing it, out of reality and into, stuff that they couldn't even see at the time.
Right. Yeah, it was I mean that was clear pretty much that like it was not really intended for streaming like in a modern way like this. It just the way it was transferred just wasn't great, which is fine, but it was a little noticeable in the beginning. And also like Amazon did not really try with the subtitles like at all. I had
Oh,
them on and then I just
yeah.
turned them off because they were distracting at how wrong they were. Like it
Yeah.
wasn't they weren't even like getting close to what they were actually saying. And I was like, why what are you why bother then? But
Yeah, because it's AI generated at that point that,
right.
it's similar to like the transcription software we've used from time to time that,
Right.
but there's no one like fact checking it, because it's all like basically being done automatically. So, because again, like this movie had fallen into obscurity, and so
Mhm.
it's not like there's a big clambering like or budget behind it. So they're just kind of throwing it up there just because, but they're not going to put a lot of money or effort into it. So
Right.
you're not going to clean up the film stock. You're not going to do anything else, and there especially aren't going to be special features. I think at this point, if you ask, outside of Schrader, who's talked about it a few times, I think like if you were asked Michael J. Fox or Joan Jett or, Michael McKean or any of the other people who are still alive, like Gina Rollins is still alive. You ask her about this movie, she's going to say, "What? I was in that? I have, you know, think all of them would, because I think this is probably fairly forgettable,
Yeah. And I mean, we talked a little bit about how some of the music in the beginning, at least Rob felt that it was a little generic. So let's kind of talk a bit more about the band and where the plot goes after that,
Yeah.
because there's this moment where like Patty, she wants the band to do well. She wants them to get better. And so she wants to get them this new PV mixing board so they can play better shows. But they don't have the money for that. So she's decides she's just going to break into a home to steal a set of tools that she can pawn and get the money to buy that. And the night that she decides to do this, the band has a gig. So they're waiting for Patty to kind of show up. Meanwhile, she's stealing these tools from this guy, but she does show up just in time. But before that, they're kind of just playing an instrumental. But when she does arrive, they play the song "This Means War," and that one, I think, like of all of these songs in the movie, this one at least I think was like pretty listenable. I liked this one. I think it was one of the more catchier ones of the movie. Nothing really unique, but at least when I read the title, I can hear it in my head, even though I watched this weeks ago. So like
Yeah,
that
yeah,
is
yeah.
at least a testament to its effectiveness. I don't know. What did you guys think of one, learning more about Patty, and two, this song?
Um, I like the song. I liked learning more about Patty. Just how they set it up was again a little weird, where uh uh they seem like because they had the scene where, okay, we're gonna steal it, and then
Right.
up we got to back out, and then it's back to and then she steals it, and you know uh just before the show. So it was weird, like that in some ways that felt like that could have just been one scene. Like you didn't need the fake out of like, oh, actually we got to break out, stop. Like you could maybe just had them break in, have a little bit of tension. Are they going to get caught, get out, and then like, okay, now we got to get to the gig or whatever. That how they did it was, like I said, a little strange, but
Yeah.
this mean. Oh, good.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say this means war was good. I enjoyed it.
Rob, what about you?
Uh,
How does this one compare to the other first, like the Light of Day song? Did you like this one better?
kind of mushed together. No, it's just
Yeah.
it's music where drunk people get together. That's the music they listen to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, if this kind of level of rock isn't your thing, then like, it's hard to kind of get on board with it. Like, I don't know, 80s rock is like what I grew up with a little bit, from my dad's CDs and stuff. So this kind of stuff just feels familiar to me, even if some of it was generic. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
I can get behind this. I enjoy it
Well,
well enough.
and we'll kind of also get into it as we go on, but you know, um, part of it is like it's not really clear. Like, yeah, they're the best local, bar band, but like it's not really clear like what the ambition, like should we be rooting for them to like sign a big record deal? Because that's not really part of the
Yeah.
plot. Like, like Michael J. Fox's character ends up kind of really aimless, like with like you're unclear of what his motivations or goals or desires throughout the plot are. Uh, um, Joan Jett seems to have some goals and desires, but again, like it's just very messy, and that's where again, like you get to wondering about like the whole scripting process and the heart not being in it. And of course, you never know what gets left on the editing room floor or whatever. But it's like, uh, uh, but to Rob's point about the music sounding kind of bland, it's hard to tell. Like, is that a choice because they're just a bar band?
Hmm.
But
But
at
yeah,
this,
that's exactly what I mean. Yeah, because like we know 80s rock, good 80s rock
yeah,
music, but it felt like is this the part where was I supposed to be impressed by someone stepping it up, or is this a plot that's going to develop into some amazing song? And again, we're just a couple of years. How far are we from like Purple Rain as an example of a rock movie, right?
yeah, yeah,
That came out like so the music was infused at different moments of the film. And here I felt like, okay, is this where that starts to happen, or am I about to be impressed? Like, what's going on here? And it was
yeah.
just not impressive. So I thought, okay, something else is about to happen.
Yeah, well, and like that's the thing where I can't get what like create like even having watched the whole thing now, I can't get what they were trying to go for in the first place. Because like clearly he wasn't trying Schrader didn't want to make like a fully musical movie like like it said when talking about Joan Jett, she liked that the music was a compliment. But that just highlights to me how messy the story itself was and how unclear what they were trying to accomplish with the story itself really
Right,
was.
Right, because
right.
even even when you look at the drama, like the drama is not all that interesting either. Like I mean, not to be rude, but it's kind of just like cookie cutter stuff you've
Hmm.
seen a lot, 100 times too. So like if we're supposed to be more focused on the drama over the music, they should have stepped up the drama a little more, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think
No,
that Joan Jett's character was very, very satisfied with being the best bar band in the
Right.
nation.
yeah.
And that to me didn't resonate whatsoever. Like, how is that impressive? And
But
most people like that I know that are in bar bands, they who are regular bar bands, they just love it for the love. But if they're actually on the grind trying to do something, they do actually want to have a hit and move on because it's not the best life.
Yeah, well, and I mean that's what I get to like when talking about like what the hell was the motivation for either of their characters. She seems to have more ambition, but it's not clear. Like, does she want to be just the best bar band locally or nationally? Does she actually want to like become a big rock star? You know, she wants it enough that she's willing to abandon her child, but it's never clear what it is. You know,
Exactly.
and you know, it's clear Michael J. Fox doesn't want it enough that, but it's also not clear what he's trying to accomplish by staying behind. You know, like it's not clear. Like, okay, is he settling down and maturing? Like, you know, like, okay, I'm putting aside, you know, the rock band dreams and growing up, and that's contrasting with, you know, Patty who's still trying to make it even in, you know, CD small. But like, it just doesn't seem like either plot line is actually leading anywhere. You know, sorry to, you know, give like some spoilers.
Yeah, we're jumping a little bit ahead here.
Yeah, but it just like so
we can talk. We can try to figure out what the heck was going on with Michael J. Fox's character a little further down the line, because some of the things and the choices this script does, I'm just like, why is this in here? And like we already mentioned like how vague it is. There's so many vague moments. But before we get to that, let's get to like the next part of the plot here, which is the moment where it's like the next day, Joe is at work at the factory, the manufacturing plant, whatever, and he's confronted by his coworker Smitty, whose brother-in-law was the target of the burglary that Patty did, and he wants Joe to repay him. And so Joe agrees to pay $600 on his sister's behalf. He asks his mother for a loan. The mom reluctantly agrees, but she's concerned about Joe covering for Patty's mistakes, kind of doesn't want him to do that anymore. And so not long after he repays Smitty, Joe learns that he's been laid off anyway. And so it's like as they pull up to the plant and he gets this news, Cleveland Rocks, the song plays in the background. And it's kind of this moment here where it's like, okay, I don't have a job. And once again, the enigma that is Patty, I guess she doesn't have a job either because they don't have any jobs tying them down. And they decide, the siblings are like, you know what? This is our chance. Let's take the Barbusters on tour. We're going to take little Benji with us and we're going to become the greatest bar band in the Ohio Nation area. So it kind of jumps into tour there. We see clips of life on tour occur. We hear like it's the song It's All Coming Down Tonight, and the tour kind of appears to be successful from these clips, but then it kind of cuts to each member discovering that they've made like $57 after a week of touring, like each of them.
But like that's like 57 in profit, like after you take out like the expenses.
Everything. Right. And so, but despite this, like the poor results of that, Patty decides she wants to thank the band for kind of going on tour and doing this. So she gives them some steaks that she claims that she had been saving up for. But Joe was just with her at the store and he saw her shoplifting them. And so when he confronts her about the theft, Patty gets pissed and just storms off, and she gets ready for the next show. And so that's kind of like that whole section there of like tour life, and you kind of see them make an attempt. Still not really clear what they're attempting. They're just trying to, I guess, expand out of Cleveland. So what did you think of the song and just like life on tour, how that was portrayed?
Well, and the shoplifting thing is more than just she shoplifted it. She used Benji to shoplift it. Which part of the reason his character would get so angry about that is because that then, especially using him, not just if she gets arrested for that, would she get in trouble, but if she gets arrested using Benji for that, that's most likely going to get CPS involved and get him taken away. And so that's where Joe really flies off the handle, and you know, in many ways rightfully so. And then also just a note, like $600 in 1987 money is about $1,600, a little bit more than that in 2024 money. I don't remember the song at all because it's been weeks, but
I don't remember this one at all, but it's just I know generally that Cleveland is considered like, the place of rock and stuff. But to me, like I know we've got the Hall of Fame up there and everything, but I've never felt like it was that special. But probably just because it's past, that time in its life. At this time, Cleveland did indeed rock. It was the go-to place for all of music. And I feel like now, Cleveland isn't necessarily the one people think of first for different
Yeah.
like rock things. But yeah,
There's
that was interesting.
there's always been that debate about whether it's truly the home of rock and roll or not.
Right.
And there are things I could say about mistakes and by lakes, and the fact they've lit their river on fire multiple times, which is an accomplishment in and of itself. But like the Cleveland Rock song, I mainly knew the Jim Carrey show used that, not
Me
Jim
too.
Carrey, Drew Carey,
Drew
Drew
Carey,
Carey.
yeah.
Um, used that as a cover version of that as an opening. So I didn't even like. Part of me, for whatever reason, thought that was original to the show.
I
Uh,
also
um,
thought that, so it's fair.
yeah, but I yeah, I don't get the appeal of Cleveland. I jokingly rag on it just being from Cincinnati, but for the most part, I'm kind of indifferent. Rob?
Yeah, at this point, I'm losing hope already because
Yeah.
there's all these signs. None of this is making. It's just not motivating for me. I'm not feeling the music, and also this is not the beginning, but it had already started to build this feeling of like, okay, actually, I guess I don't like Patty. She's starting to annoy
Hmm.
me, and
Mm,
if she wasn't cute, people would really start to call her out
yeah.
on her actions.
Yeah,
And
she's
that's it. But like, I'm not being judgmental. It's just that like I'm just saying that like, oh, you're not a character that is that I'm like going to be fond of here. Like, okay, I have to. It's
yeah.
like this should be a good movie despite you. Is that what this is?
But she's definitely got a bit of that manic pixie energy, where
Yeah.
that you're almost supposed to love her because of her quirkiness.
Hmm.
And again, Rob, you like with the script, it's so hard to tell. Like, were they trying were they trying to condemn Patty at times? Were you supposed to love her and want to root, like,
Yeah.
and it also just wasn't clear, like, in some ways, if you have two leads in the way they tried to, you have no leads because like you don't actually have a central character. You're not sure if the script is really following Patty or Joe, and instead it ends up following neither.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
definitely gets weird and messy. And also just like the fight itself, like I understand there like this is getting into like weird choices for the movie and the script writing. Like there are things that these characters say and I'm like, why would you write that? Like what are you even
Hmm.
thinking? Like he's mad at Patty about, using the kid to steal and he's like, "Oh, what's next? Kitty porn?" And I was like, "What?
But yeah,
Why are you jumping to that? What do you mean? Like there were like I think it was at this point in the movie where I was like, oh God, like this script is not it. Like it's not it, which really bummed me out because it's like, oh, I like these actors, but yeah,
yeah,
that I think it was at this point in the film where I was like, okay, this film is just a little bit of a mess.
yeah. No,
Hmm.
I mean, again, like this film is so baffling that it exists, and again, for the choices that were made along the way, like it's not the movie you would expect from Paul Schrader, both in terms of content and in terms of execution. That it is just like it is just baffling choices all the way down. Um,
No,
you know,
totally. Well, some of I want to talk a little bit about some of Joe's coworker, Smitty and Oogie.
mm,
Um, Smitty is played by Thomas G. Waits, as an actor that should be familiar to anyone who listened to our last episode, because he played Fox in The Warriors, the character Fox. And he's the guy who works at the plant with Joe in like, hey, Waits is an actor, director known for his roles in The Thing and Justice for All and Money Train. He's most recently directed a romantic comedy in 2023 called Target. I am not familiar with that.
I hadn't heard it either.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Intrigued.
And then Oogie, right. Oogie is played by Michael Rooker. Michael Rooker has an impressive career spanning decades, but he's probably most known for his role as Yondu in the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise, and Merle Dixon, of course, in The Walking Dead. He's great in that one. He's one of those characters that you end up loving. I mean, he's a perfect bad guy in Walking Dead. In addition to those roles, he's appeared in many films like Mallrats, Tombstone, 8 Men Out. But in his role in Light of Day, it just became his second film credit in his career at that point.
Yeah. Well, and it was so weird to see Rooker as the roadie, but Thomas G. Waits is kind of how we found this movie in the first place. Was when we were working on the Warriors, and it was like, wait, what's this movie? How have I never heard of it? Okay, it's available somewhere. I'm morbidly curious. Let's go ahead and watch it.
You know what? I gotta say, even though this script is a mess, I still think it was more watchable than The Apple. So that's better. Yeah, so
I get that. And
definitely more watchable.
Well, and I think there's more for us to talk about. Than just hearing Kristen say, "I hate it" and "I hate you."
I never said I hate you. I might have said it with my eyes, but not verbally.
Yeah. But that is where we have to leave things for this episode. Will Joe and Patty reconcile? Will Patty achieve her rock and roll dreams? Who is little Benji's father? Tune in to part 2 to find out, and most importantly, to hear what we think of it all in the next episode of the Savage Movie Night podcast. Thanks so much, as always, to my co-hosts Rob and Kristen, our editor Javi, and the entire Savage content team. Thanks to our sponsor, Jazzology with Willard Jenkins, and most of all, thank you to our audience. Remember to give us a review wherever you get your podcasts from, and if you are watching on YouTube, give us a follow, give us a like, click the notification bell, leave a comment, all the good YouTube things. I'm your host, Adam, and we'll see you again in the next episode of the Savage Movie Night podcast.